This podcast of the hour is brought to you by Budweiser, king of beers.
All right, the book is called I Don't Believe in Atheists. Here's the man who wrote it, Mr. Chris Hedges. Welcome back. All right. I'm assuming, well, obviously it's a much more complex story than just the title, but for those who haven't read it yet, I mean, give them the premise of that. I don't believe in atheists.
I went out to debate Harris and Hitchens, who you just saw, after spending 2 years writing about the radical Christian right. And I hadn't looked closely at their work, but of course I had to debate them. And I was stunned at how the very chauvinism and bigotry and intolerance that they condemn in the Christian right, they embrace under the guise of atheism. They also create a kind of binary worldview of us and them. They embrace the use of force, but they're supporters of preemptive war. Their political agenda coalesces completely with the radical Christian right. And what they've done is form a belief system, a leap of faith, that says that we are moving forward as a species towards, you know, some kind of human utopia, that society can be made perfectible or is perfectible once we eradicate religion. They have, you know, they've externalized evil into religion itself, something the Christian right does when they externalize evil into secular humanism. The ideological framework for this is no different from the Christian right.
The framework's no different, but the content is very different, though, isn't it?
Well, not really, because it's a matter of what they believe. And when you, I mean, they are as culturally, historically, and linguistically illiterate as the radical Christian right. If you read what they write and say about Muslims, it could be lifted from the most rabid sermon by a Christian fundamentalist. They condemn them as irrational religious hordes who have to be either converted to our way of thinking, because of course they engage in that kind of chauvinism and self-exaltation, that our way is the civilized way, the only way. There are no other ways to be, other ways to think, other ways to... And if they won't be converted, then they have to be annihilated. I mean, Sam Harris, in The End of Faith, asks us to consider a nuclear first strike on the Arab world. They defend torture. I mean, this kind of stuff is terrifying.
Yeah, but that's not the worldview of atheists. That's the worldview of Sam Harris.
No, it's the new atheists. And, you know, atheism, I mean, and I'm talking about Nietzsche and Sartre and Camus, although Camus changed later, is an important force in the Western intellectual tradition. And never forget the great reformers, philosophical and theological, people like Spinoza, even Martin Luther, were condemned as atheists and heretics. So atheism has been a spur towards intellectual development. And that's why I didn't pay a lot of attention to them. They're not a political threat, the way the Christian right is certainly in the United States. They haven't created systems of indoctrination through Christian radio and television. They haven't infiltrated branches, the 3 branches of government in the United States.
Hello, Hollywood, come on.
Yeah.
Nothing sells atheism better, doesn't it? But Harris and Hitchens are different than Dawkins, aren't they? They both, I mean, Dawkins comes from a very scientific,
yes.
So he believes, and a lot of people agree with him, there's lots of proof to back up Dawkins' argument. Hitchens and Harris are different.
Well, they're different in the sense that Dawkins is much more skeptical of the American imperial project. He doesn't, you know, Hitchens is one of the great propagandists for the war in Iraq, as is Harris. And Dawkins is British, of course. But I think all of them engage in what I would call the cult of science. They say that evolutionary biology can be used as a model towards the evolution of human moral behavior, collectively, that we can advance, that time is linear. There's nothing in human history or human nature that supports that idea, and there's nothing in Darwin. In Darwin's Origin of the Species, he never posited that human beings evolve morally. In fact, Darwin wrote, I think correctly, that we're captive to irrational forces and to our animal natures. And so what they've done is make a leap of faith, really, that is just as egregious and just as self-delusional as the leap of faith made by Christian fundamentalists.
It's kind of a silly fight in one sense, in that you're asking, one group of people says, here's what happens when you die, and another group of people says, here's what happens when you die, and nobody knows anything.
Well, we don't know what happens to us when we die. You know, I think one of the things I found, you know, I came here and debated Charles McVitie, and I've debated other fundamentalists in the United States. When I got up on the stage with Harris and Hitchens, it was as if I was debating a Christian fundamentalist. Because what does a Christian fundamentalist do?
Well, they're bullies.
Well, they're bullies, and they get up and say, you know, I grew up in the church, I went to seminary, but I'm not a Christian. I'm a force for godless, secular humanism that's trying to... This is the attack of the fundamentalists and was the attack of McVitie at the University of Toronto. What happens when I get up on the stage with these people? They say, you know, I don't believe in an anthropomorphic God. I don't believe in heaven and hell. I don't believe in miracles. I don't know what's going to happen to us when we die. I don't believe in the virgin birth, any of that kind of stuff. But I become a repository for superstition, ignorance, all of the things I don't believe. It doesn't matter what I say. What they've done is embody religion as the impediment towards human progress, and once it's removed, we can all move forward. I would argue that the problem is not religion. The problem is human nature. The problem is the human heart. And of course, religious institutions and religious figures throughout history have cheered on, you know, more bloodbaths than many figures. But that's a problem that is endemic within us.
But can you separate? I mean, religion doesn't exist unless it's executed by somebody. So can you separate human nature and the human heart from religious practice? I mean, they're the same thing.
Well, I think that religious institutions, you know, as the theologian Paul Tillich said, are like all human institutions, are inherently demonic. They're about power. They're about self-perpetuation. We have to separate from the religious impulse. Religion is not something that can be studied like science. Religion is not a noun. It's a verb. It's a way of being. It's a way of looking at the world. And religion, like art, I think, struggles to capture those non-rational forces that are real and powerful in our life. Forces like beauty, grief, alienation, suffering, mortality. You can't measure that with science. And I think art, like religion at its best, seeks to preserve and honor this tradition of the non-rational that is also part of our lives.
But you can measure a lot of it with chemicals and hormones. I mean, a lot of it is strictly science.
Right, but how, for instance, do you quantify love? I mean, Freud wrote about this. Yeah. Every time Freud tried to write about love, he wrote about sex. And he finally wrote, you know, I can't.
Because there's no difference, Chris. It's the same. There's no difference at all. No, but I mean, and I guess I've wondered for you, are you surprised you're in this position? Because I know,
I am.
You know, people walk by and see, I don't believe in atheists. Chris Hedges must be a minister.
I know. I am surprised, and I wasn't planning to write the book. You know, look, I lived 20 years overseas as a foreign correspondent. I'm well aware that there is nothing intrinsically moral about being a believer or a non-believer. Yeah. That many people of great moral courage and probity have arisen in all cultures and all traditions to fight the oppressor on behalf of the oppressed, who don't find meaning in religious ritual, religious language. I get that. Just as I know that many religious figures, you know, I covered the war in the former Yugoslavia, and the Serbian Orthodox Church, like the Catholic Church in Croatia, like many of the mosques in Bosnia, enthusiastically signed on for the ethnic cleansing. So I'm aware of that. And I am also aware that politically, the Christian right in my country is a threat. And a serious threat.
Well, it seems like it also abandoned the social gospel.
Completely. And it's what I think both of these movements have in common is that what they appeal to is a kind of self-exaltation, a kind of we have moral superiority. As an atheist, you know, we look down on the less fortunate, less educated, less enlightened. Well, the Christian right does the same. And I think when you divide people into moral planes, that becomes very dangerous. When you believe that evil is external and not something that we must all struggle with inside of ourselves, then it's a short step towards eradicating whole groups of human beings because they're no longer human, but they're abstractions of the evil that you want to get rid of.
I don't believe in atheists is the name of the book. Where does Scientology fit into this?
That's my next book.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming in, man.
Hey,
Chris Hedges, everybody. I don't believe in atheists is what it's called. Atheist or not, today is St. Patrick's Day, and Catherine O'Hara is hosting one of the biggest parties in the country. We'll ask her about it and more now.